This is the In the Rabbit Hole episode archive project. What you're about to watch and listen to is a past episode from In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel now.
And now two guys who survived a zombie attack, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 72 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, news from the farm, news from the zombie apocalypse front, and more deep thoughts about survival and how it impacts your life. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan.
And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Today's show is sponsored by Cat's Coffee. If you're looking for truly exceptional coffee to help you survive the morning or the next zombie apocalypse, you need to be drinking Cat's. They specialize in the finest coffee from sources that prioritize environmental responsibility and are fair trade certified. Their goal is to achieve perfection in every cup. Check them out at Catz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com, or click on their bright green banner on the site and make sure you're dealing with an official sponsor of the show. Again, that's Catz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com. Okay, much to cover today. We've been taking a little bit of time off recently, but we are now back in the saddle and doing another episode. And the good folks at SJF.com shot us a tweet on Twitter requesting a farm update. So we're going to get you that today. We actually have a zombie apocalypse update and a few other show announcements that we've been getting requests about. But I guess to start with, let's start with the farm update.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I've heard some stories and they're disturbing.
Well, only one of them was truly disturbing, and we'll come to that at the end. More of a cautionary tale having to do with watering systems. But to start with, Jason and I met with a new breeder and have actually started introducing New Zealand's into the rabbit part of the farm. And I got to say, I actually do prefer New Zealand's over Californians so far.
They are nicer, more polite.
They are more plump.
Less fiscal problems.
They're nice rabbits, but the breeder kind of cleared up a lot of things for us. I mean, we've been joking around a lot that we've had such problems. Jason and I have been joking around a lot, and you've been making fun of us for having so many problems with it. But as it turns out, the truth was the problems we've been having were not uncommon. Most of it really was due to the heat that we've been experiencing and that we generally experience in Texas. But with the heat and the drought and everything else, the rabbits have been having a rather difficult time. And she said, you guys are not alone. It really is. All the rabbit breeders in the area are having real difficulties. And we talked through like what kind of production levels we've been getting. And she was basically, yeah, that's pretty much in line with everybody else. You guys really aren't, other than the obvious stupid little things that we've been doing just because of inexperience. Right. For the most part, it was all pretty normal. So that was good to know. And I think it lifted our spirits a little bit. It wasn't like, okay, we're complete idiots or we're complete failures at this.
No more hippie love rabbits.
No more hippie love rabbits. No. And we're actually, all of a sudden, we're up to about 22 rabbits.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn, that's a lot of rabbits.
It is a lot of rabbits, which Jason was arguing with me about. And I will give him this, that he's like, well, a lot of these rabbits we do have to call because we have a lot of bucks right now. So, and things have been so busy lately and we've been doing so many different things that we should have actually called these rabbits about 4 weeks ago, and we haven't done it. So now we have like an overabundance of rabbits that need to be culled. But I think even then, if I remember correctly, it's about 4 or 5 rabbits that'll need to be culled, which still leaves us with a fair amount of rabbits.
Right. I was about to say, it's still a 20 rabbits down to 15.
Yeah. And, well, I was 17, I think. And then the chickens, I have noticed that I like eating the rabbits a lot more. I like dealing with the rabbits a lot more. I like dealing with the rabbits a lot more, especially the rabbit poop. Much less disgusting than chickens. Chickens are filthy, nasty, gross animals.
But the advantage is they do keep producing eggs.
They do keep producing eggs. I'll give them that. They reproduce more quickly, and they are easier to deal with from that aspect. Because it really, especially with the incubator, and we did there was a Friday Gear post for people who are interested in the exact model and everything that we got. But I bought, it was about a $150 incubator, and it holds 7 eggs at a time, which I will tell you at first we didn't think was enough. And now I can tell you, now that we have an overabundance of chickens and we're out of space for chickens rather quickly, 7 eggs at a time is plenty, especially if you're in a small place. So, and it pretty much, we've gotten pretty much, other than the one time I screwed up the turn ratio on the incubator, we've had about 100% hatch rate. So that goes pretty quickly. And then within about 3 months, 2 to 3 months, you have an animal that you can eat. And then shortly after that, you have an animal producing eggs. But they are gross. They are gross. The chicks we've been keeping the chicks. We have these 2 big cages in my garage, and that's where we've been keeping the chicks so that we're keeping them warm enough and keeping them till they get big enough to introduce into the flock. And since the studio is directly over the garage, the studio, I'm now having to do a lot of things to keep the smell of chicken crap out of the studio.
Part of me is very happy that I'm 180 miles away.
I was just going to mention that you'll be very sized, but we're Jason and I are getting ready to take measures, and we've been talking to the guy that builds our cages, and he's going to build us some cages very similar to the cages we have for the rabbits that are going to be suspended chick cages. Since it's hot enough here that they don't really need heat lamps on them right now. I mean, we can keep them in the garage for about 2 weeks and keep a heat lamp on them and really keep them warm for about 2 weeks. And then we figured after that, then we can actually move them to the suspended cages that are outdoors, and then we don't have to deal with the smell. Because really, the chicks themselves are not bad for about the first 2 or 3 weeks. It's right at about 3 weeks they just become disgusting.
When they stop being babies.
Well, it's when all of a sudden they just become, for lack of a better word, shit factories.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Like any babies, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's been pretty cool, and the little chicks are fun. I mean, it's like little rabbits. They're fun. They're cute. They're baby animals. So, and then they grow up and become disgusting. So, and but it's actually, so the farm's actually been going pretty well, and we've realized we're within about the next 3 weeks. I think we'll actually be at the point where the livestock part of the farm is finished, with the exception of we're still trying to decide whether or not we're going to introduce the miniature pygmy goats, or actually I think those are 2 different things. If there's a miniature goat, then there's a pygmy goat. But besides a final decision on whether or not we're going to do goats or not, the livestock part of the farm will be done. We will actually be full up on the amount of space we have for suspending cages for rabbits, and we will be at our technical legal limit for chickens.
Nice. So when does the vegetation growth start?
Well, that's kind of, we started the farm backwards of the way that most people do. Most people actually start with vegetables and plants, and since we started with livestock first. So probably next month we'll start really building more planters. And I know when Jason and I spoke the other night that we had kind of come to the conclusion, since it's so hot here and there's not that much that you can really grow in the heat of the summer in Houston, that we're going to start working on our aquaponics system, which we've realized is going to be a rather large system. Mm-hmm. So, and it's going to take us a while because it's just physically going to be a big system. And we looked at doing a smaller system first, but it was really like, there's no point. If we're going to do it and we have the space and this is our plan, there was no good way to scale up for us.
It's more difficult to actually start building onto it once you got it there than it is to just start bigger.
Yeah, exactly. Because the tanks we were going to need to be the finished system were going to be a lot larger, and the scaffolding system we were going to put in place to do a tiered vertical aquaponic system, there was no way to really scale it. So it was like, let's just get started. So it's I'm guessing it's going to take us at least 6 months to finish this project. It may actually take us a full year. partly because of the expense of such a large system.
Yeah, and it takes time to grow vegetables. I mean, let's face it, it's kind of like everything else. It takes trial and error to get even, even the animal production part of the farm took a lot of trial and error. It's been probably about a year, right, since you started this whole process.
Yeah, actually the livestock part of the farm has been right at a year. And but with the aquaponics, it's more about just actually physically constructing the system itself.
Right.
And like you were saying, the trial and errors, because even the construction is going to have a lot of trial and error, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because that's, aquaponics is a really neat system. It's very do-it-yourself as far as the aquaponics community from what we've seen and all the info. And we've gathered a lot of information about aquaponics and been kind of poring over it together and talking through it. And here's some step-by-step guides to it, but it's like anything, you take it and then you say, okay, well, this is the space and the configuration I want, so it's not exactly the same. So then you have to overcome those barriers of how do I adapt this to my exact situation. So that's where that's going to go, and that should be interesting. But that's the next project that we're going to start on is the aquaponics, and then we'll be working on that slowly through the summer, mostly just acquiring materials because we have some rather large tanks that we're going to have delivered, and there's all those shenanigans that are going to be involved with that. And then come fall, we're actually going to start some actual raised beds beyond the shipping pallet beds that we built, which we won't do again. It was a fun exercise, but they're not that great. So we'll be doing some more traditional styles and construction methods for the raised beds back there, but it should be good and it's fun. It's like anything else we were talking about when we were really kind of down on the farm emotionally, I guess, about it and feeling frustrated with it, and one of the things we really realized was it was just as much about Jason and I hanging out and doing goofy projects together as it was actual production. So, right. Taking that mindset of it and just enjoying the experience and enjoying hanging out together and doing something more productive necessarily than drinking or chasing girls, both of which would get us into trouble for multiple reasons, but it's still fun, even when it doesn't go according to plan and it doesn't turn out exactly as you'd like it to.
Sometimes it's more fun when it doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah, we get great stories for the show, which brings us to the final part of the farm update. I learned Jason and I both learned a very valuable lesson, which is if you're going to use the automatic watering systems for your rabbits, which is where it has a large 5-gallon bucket that delivers water to the rabbits, instead of using the individual bottles or the bowls, you really do need to check those tanks pretty regularly. And do not forget the lid off the top, because as we found, birds have a tendency to fly into them to get a drink of water and then may not be able to get out. And so I went to the Dominican Republic, and apparently shortly before I left, a mockingbird flew into one of the buckets that I had taken the lid off and meant to put back on. It didn't. So then while I was gone, evidently the water level was low enough that the bird was actually surviving, and I don't understand how it couldn't get out, but for whatever reason it couldn't. Then Jason came along, and while I was out of town, went in and filled that bucket, and then that apparently drowned that bird. So the bird was dead for about a week in that bucket, and the rabbits were drinking what we found to be dead bird tea.
Wow.
It is 10 times more disgusting than what you're picturing right now. I was actually bleeding the line because I was looking at the tank. I thought there's a lot of algae that's built up in there over the last week. So I started bleeding the line, and the water coming out of it was just really foul. And I was like, I have never smelled algae that stinks that bad. Something's not right here. So I went over and pulled the bucket down and looked into it, and I actually had to do a double take because I was like, what in blazes? I used more foul language than that, but we try to keep it somewhat clean for the show. And I looked down in there, and there is a halfway I'm not even kidding. It literally was halfway decomposed in that amount of time, and it's full of maggots and everything else. And yes, I'm painting an extra disgusting picture for everyone else because I want to share love. Y'all didn't have to smell it. I did.
On behalf of all of us, I'm so glad you didn't take a picture.
I almost did. But then I realized, if I posted that on Facebook, we'd probably lose like half our fans. They're like, you guys are gross.
Either that or Facebook would kick us off or something weird like that.
Yeah. So yes, the moral of the story is check your water. If you have rabbits and you're using an automatic watering system like we are, check those buckets pretty regularly because you never know what climbs in there. And don't forget to put the lids back on after you fill your buckets. So anyway, that's enough of the farm update for everybody that wanted one. There it is. It's going better. We're having more fun with it, and we've definitely started to take a different attitude with it, and we're starting to really see some progress with things. So anyway, we also have a quick announcement. We've been getting quite a few emails from people asking for transcripts of the show, and the reasonings have varied from just wanting notes from the show or more detailed notes from the show to people saying that they don't have time in a week to listen to the show, but they have an interest in the show. And the hard fact of the matter is transcripts are something that we really did look into, and it's something that we looked into from the very beginning and onset of the show, because it was something that other podcasts that I've listened to at least once in each podcast that I listen to, whether it's survival or business or anything else, I've heard people mention, hey, no, we're not going to do transcripts. And I understood the reasonings to an extent, and I didn't fully understand them until I really got into it. Doing transcripts is actually very expensive, especially if you're doing a show. I mean, on average, our shows are about 45 minutes long, and that would equate to about, if on a per minute basis, now there's a lot of different services and the prices vary, but we would be looking at about $100 an episode to provide transcripts of the show. And producing a free podcast, you got to draw the line somewhere to say, I'm only going to sink so much into a podcast that we put out there for people to listen to for free. And not that we don't love you, our little lemon drops, but $100 a show for transcripts is more. And I just don't know that there are enough people that want transcripts that even if we charged, say, $10 an episode for transcripts, that we wouldn't be out money every single episode providing them. So
yeah, we'd almost have to go in and charge the first guy the full $120 an episode, and
everybody else gets it for $1.
Yep.
So don't be that first guy, which then creates a conundrum of no transcripts. So that for the people that ask or wonder about the transcripts, I've of course emailed each of those people back individually and said it's not something that we're really capable of doing. But now you have the longer answer of why there are no transcripts for the show, and if you listen to any other podcasts, probably why almost none of them have transcripts either, unless you're listening to somebody that just has a lot of expendable capital and just really
or a whole lot of free time.
A whole lot of free time, yeah, to transcribe their own shows, or it's people are actually there's enough people to offset the cost of doing it. So there you have it. And to a more exciting update about the world in general, and I got to say, I'm very angry with this news in a completely self-centered way. Not only for you and I, Jonathan, but also for the audience, because it completely screws up the schedule of this show.
Mm-hmm. It does. It is scary. It is ridiculous. And could they not have waited till October? I mean, couldn't they have respected that little bit and just waited until October?
I got to tell you, drug dealers,
not respectful at all.
No, they do not respect the In the Rabbit Hole episode schedule. Because every October we try to do a zombie theme. And it is the middle of summer. It is not the appropriate time to be talking about these zombies.
It's too hot for zombies.
It is too hot for zombies. They're nasty. It's humid. They stink a little extra. They rot a little extra. It's kind of like that. It's like dead bird tea.
Exactly.
It's like zombie tea. I wonder if zombies sweat.
Probably not. They just decompose, and it's hot and nasty. And in Houston, it's humid. In Austin, it's dry. I mean, it's just disgusting. Zombies in the summer is just inappropriate.
Yes, completely inappropriate. So if you have no clue what on earth we're talking about, you've not been watching the news.
Well, you may have been in a closet.
Yes. So please come out of the closet and pay attention to the news. We are actually having a zombie apocalypse going on. There is a new drug on the market. For you teens out there listening to the show, please don't think this is a wise idea. Ooh, a new drug. I want to take it. It's called bath salts. And I'm sort of clear on why they call it bath salts, which I actually have another beef with. I mean, if you're going to make a drug that hops people up, makes them strip off their clothes and eat other people's faces off, bath salts just doesn't really seem like a good marketing ploy. I mean, it should be called like crystal meth on crack, you know?
Yeah, maybe they were going for that calming effect, like that. they just hit it wrong, They wanted the sensation of sitting in a bathtub full of bath salts, but what they really got was the desire to eat other people's faces off.
Maybe they were being ironic. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm missing the joke.
Maybe the desire, maybe the fulfilling of the desire to eat other people's faces off brings on the calming effect of bath salts.
Could be. So if you are uninitiated and still not paying attention to the news, there is, as we said, a new drug on the market called bath salts.
And the best way, if you want to go search it, you can go onto Google and search Miami bath salts face eating. I'm sure you will find plenty of articles.
Yes, and unfortunately, a lot of pictures.
Yes, there are pictures. Don't look at the pictures.
The victim really does look like he was attacked by a zombie. And actually, Miami was, I think, the first one that was like big in the news because it was probably the most dramatic. But there have since been at least 3 or 4 other reported incidents with similar behaviors in the news. And one of the articles...
one more thing, Aaron, sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing was when they asked the Miami Police Department if this was unusual and new, the response was, no, we've seen it a few times before.
Really? I hadn't seen that. That's
which to me is even crazier.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so there's been like 3 or 4, and I don't know. I haven't been able to figure out yet, and I don't know if maybe anybody has figured. I'm sure somebody's figured out if this is a behavior that is truly indicative of that drug. But the 2 big newsworthy characteristics seem to be that people tear off their clothes and then become hyper violent to the extent of. And what's weird is each time that it's been like a cannibalistic thing or whatever, they've always attacked the face.
Yes. I guess it's just there. It's easy. It's not covered by clothes.
I suppose. The cheeks are pretty meaty and pretty soft.
Yeah.
But
plus, a mouthful of like cotton shirt just doesn't sound good. I don't know.
Yeah. It sounds very dry and kind of chewy.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't see the benefit in that as trying to view it from a zombie standpoint. So yeah, freaky new drug, and the zombie apocalypse is upon us. And as Dan asked, how many bullets do I need? And we'll go back to as many as you think you're going to need to pull that trigger.
I would say I recommend the Hornady Zombie Z-Max ammo.
But there's issues with that too, as we discussed a little bit before the show.
Yeah, so I'm gonna read this to everybody because I feel like it needs to be read, and I'm gonna try to get through it pretty quickly. But it's the disclaimer on the box of 9mm Hornady Z-Max ammo that I actually do have. And by the way, I just want to be clear. I bought the ammo because it is a crazy box, and it wasn't any more or less expensive than the regular stuff. So it actually says, disclaimer, Hornady Zombie Max ammunition is not a toy. It is live ammunition, but is intended only to be used on zombies, also known as the living dead, undead, etc. No human being, plant, animal, vegetable, or mineral should ever be shot with Hornady Zombie Max ammunition. Again, we repeat, Hornady Zombie Max ammunition is for use on zombies only, and that's not a nickname, phrase, or cute way of referring to anybody, place, or thing. When we say zombies, we mean zombies. Well, I don't know if that opens up extra litigation in the case of a defense shooting, so I may never actually use this stuff. It may just sit here and look pretty. And I have plenty of other 9mm ammunition just in case. But if you do have to come up against zombies, just know the only one that I've found that is truly manufactured for zombies is the Hornady Zombie Max ammunition.
But you got to wonder, their testing had to be purely theoretical unless they were, rounding up people on bath salts and shooting them.
Hey, you never know. I mean, they might have.
Yeah, they might have.
It's an ammo company. They want to make sure that the ammunition you're getting is ready for the job done. Maybe they have special zombie ballistic gel. A little bit looser, a little bit more decayed.
Interesting. I that might require a phone call to Hornady to find out.
I'm going to send that email
You should.
I'm going to write that email later today.
And then we, of course, share it with the listeners.
Yes.
So yeah, man, that's a lot of crazy stuff, and good to know. You should not shoot anyone with zombie Hornady ammo, because apparently it could. Yeah, I guess if you had a DA or an assistant DA or whatever that just really wanted to be a particular dick about it.
Right. I mean, I don't think, I know that their disclaimer is as big a joke as the rest of the box and everything else. And it's really just, from everything I've ever read, all their ZMAX ammo is the same as their regular critical defense loads. I believe it's the FTX bullet.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know if I'd want to risk it with that kind of disclaimer on there.
I wouldn't. So let's go ahead and jump in the show, which is kind of an interesting one. And it is, what is the difference between preparedness, self-reliance, and self-sufficiency? And I think before we get into that, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, it may be interesting to hear and maybe interesting to talk about, but why? Why would we need to talk about that? And it's like anything. If you don't define things, then you don't really know where you are with things, and it makes it unclear as to how to move forward. And also, we're going to kind of put things in a way today that give perspective, and also maybe dispel some other myths about perfection in survival, that whether or not it's even possible. So let's start with the simplest one, which is preparedness. The community has started to kind of adopt the new term preparedness or preppers. And a lot of it is because, most of us wanted to get away from that 1970s, or I guess 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s vision of people that go off into the backwoods, wear camo all the time, and are consumed with the idea that the universe is plotting against them, and that everything is a conspiracy theory. Every group that is not them is plotting against them, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the community, just like when the community went from the term retreaters, which was technically the original term for survivalists, and then the guy's name, who I just completely forgot, decided that was not manly enough, that the term needed more hair on its chest, so it started to become survivalists. Mm-hmm. And now we see a similar trend where people are saying we'd like to soften the image, so it's becoming preppers. But the term preparedness itself, if we just look at it on its surface, it's purely, if we read the textbook definition, would be a state of readiness, especially for war. But that's just it. It's a state of readiness. So if we were just going to give a single kind of concept, just picture a can of green beans that you bought from the grocery store and brought home and set on your shelf. That would be preparedness. That would be, you have acquired something that you put a little bit of effort into getting, and you're just storing things up. So the pros to that are that you can prepare very easily for whatever level of eventuality you're looking at. So let's say you're only interested in being able to survive a week's catastrophe. That's as much energy as you're willing to put into this lifestyle, or however you want to look at it. That's pretty easy to do. You go to the grocery store, buy a week's worth of extra food that you cycle through on a regular basis. Maybe you replenish it on and there's plenty of people that just go to the store, buy a week's worth of food, and then every 7 years go down and donate it to the homeless shelter, and then go back and replenish it. I guess it has its benefits, but in general, I look at it as a bad idea. It doesn't become an active part of your life. But again, that's kind of the big gray areas of what it means to be prepared, and how you as an individual, how each of us define what it means to be prepared. So that raises a lot of interesting questions for us as individuals. What does it mean to be prepared for us as individuals? Because again, it could be just a week, or it allows us to go to 3 months, or for some people, it's as long as 3 years. 3 years in general seems to be kind of the max that you can really store up foods for most people. And I think that has to do with how long most of these foods last and can be stored for. I know some of them can be stored for ridiculous amounts of times, but in general, and also space available. 3 years worth of food requires a lot of square footage.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think in the other side of it, we can look at the cons. And the cons are that preparedness by itself, in the way that we've just talked about, just storing up things, whether we're talking about zombie ammo, whether we're talking about canned goods, MREs, food, water, things like that. It's like, okay, we accumulate all this stuff, and then we look at it from the standpoint of whatever I'm expecting, I expect it to last this long, and I've stored up that amount. And in a way, that's actually pretty short-sighted. And then we've only prepared for what we think may happen, and that doesn't take into account black swan events, which are the things that we totally didn't see or expect, whether as an individual or as a society. The other con is that there is absolutely no sustainability in that. Once you run through your stores, then you're done. If we're going to talk about a shit hit the fan situation.
Right. We're using, by the way, the definition that Aaron used, we're using specifically. I mean, you could broaden the definition of preparedness to include lots of things. But for the purpose of this discussion, it's kind of this idea of preparing physically with items, things.
Exactly.
And that way, this is allowing everybody to kind of create a construct of a mindset of all the things you need in order to be truly prepared. Preparedness is just one aspect of it.
Exactly. I would completely agree with that. And I think that's where we're looking at from as far as why I'm saying there's no sustainability in that, because
right.
it is a finite amount of resources that, and to be fair, a finite set of resources and materials, and however you want to look at it, that we have predetermined and decided that is our level of interest or financial limits or whatever the constraints are that we're putting on it or that are put upon it. It ends. It would end very abruptly, I think. And so, and that's not, I'm not listing the cons as a way of poo-pooing on the concept of just being prepared. And again, this is just a show about thinking through things and thinking about what does it mean? What are these individual aspects of preparedness, self-reliance, and self-sufficiency? What do they really mean, and how do they fit into the scope of your life, or in my life, and Jonathan's life, and everybody's life that's involved in this?
Right.
So we couldn't really run through these things without listing both the pros and the cons. So I don't want anybody to think that we're saying, hey, if all you do is go to the store and buy a week's worth of food, 2 weeks worth of food, 3 months worth of food, and buy flashlights and batteries and everything else, if that is your level and that is where you've decided that it ends for you, that's fine for you. Things could never happen that push you to the edge where it may never be an issue for you. It may never be an issue for me based on mine or Jonathan. And as far as sustainability, that negates whether or not it's even sustainable, because it may not matter.
The key is that the whole idea here is you can't be, and again, in the construct of what we've created here, you can't be prepared for more than you know.
Yes.
And that in and of itself is the greatest con or the greatest problem with just stocking up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I think we've talked about it in a variety of shows of why you also have to focus on skills, and even if it's just skills for what you see. But and I think the other part of it that we really do have to kind of discuss is to compare and contrast the feasibility of the three, and just preparing for and just acquiring and through what we've already defined. It's highly feasible, and it's pretty easy to do, because if we're just talking about foreseeable events, then it's like, okay, I only see the maximum things being wrong for 2 weeks. That's easy to take care of. I can very easily go buy 2 weeks worth of flashlight batteries and food and entertainment and bullets for the zombies. And yes, we're going to make fun of that for the entire show. And we would be, I think the audience would hold it against us if we did not. So, but the low feasibility for high impact, low probability events, meaning it's It's very easy to plan for the simple stuff. It's non-existent for the unforeseeable black swan events.
Right. And I think that's the whole idea. It's you need to have more than just stuff to prepare. Even not to the level of a black swan event. It could be even, there are areas of the country that don't normally get tornadoes. They get instead other things. And, when it does hit and people aren't prepared, they don't have the other tools they need in order to be prepared for that. Yes, I've got some water, or I've got something saved up, but I don't have the things I need for X disaster because I didn't expect it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to move on to self-reliance. Now, here's a tricky thing. Self-reliance and self-sufficiency are often used interchangeably. And we did spend some time really kind of looking at the definitions and, really looking at if in reality they are so close that they're easily mistaken for one another, or if there really is a difference. And, if you really want to split hairs, there is a difference within it. But if we're going to just talk about, for our conversation's sake, to really put a wider gap between, we can look at self-reliance as just your ability to kind of rely on yourself, but it's not a 100% thing. It's, you can take care of yourself within reason, and self-sufficiency actually starts to lean more towards what we would consider this myth of perfection, whether we're talking about survival or anything else. And I'm going to make this quick distinction before we really move on and start traveling through the bullet points of self-reliance, which is that there is the idea of perfection. But perfection in and of itself is, unless you are an omnipotent being, perfection is impossible. Because you can never be perfect at anything. And that is true of whether in our professional lives, whether in the context of survival, you can never have perfect survival. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. Perfection is non-existent for us as human beings. And so that's really where we get into more with self-sufficiency. But to go back and to start going through self-reliance, now that we kind of have those distinctions and can talk about it intelligently so that it's not confusing, it's really about the capacity to rely on one's own abilities, to manage one's own affairs. It's independence, not being dependent. So to give an example, to kind of relate back to what we talked about with preparedness, whereas preparedness is just, you go to the store and you buy a can of green beans and you come home and set it on your shelf and it's like, okay, I'm ready for that 1 or 2 meals now, at least as far as my vegetable needs go. With self-reliance, then we're getting more into, I grow the green beans and I can them, and then I stick them on the shelf. So now I have a level of, I'm depending on myself. I'm not depending on a grocery store to provide me with the ability of going and just buying a can of green beans off the shelf. The pros of this are that it's a high to medium sustainability. It's you can for most aspects of your life, this would be, aside from how time consuming it might be and how far you want to go with it, obviously, it's pretty easy to do. As long as you have the time, energy, and other resources necessary for supporting the logistics in place.
Self-reliance to me is the ability to, using the growing analogy, right? I could be a farmer, but I could be a specific type of farmer. I still have interactions with others, but I am self-reliant. I drive my own destiny. I could have an interaction with Farmer Joe. If I don't like Farmer Joe anymore, I don't like working with Farmer Joe. In my world, I can just go off and choose to work with Farmer Bob instead. And I'm self-reliant in the sense that I can make those decisions, but I'm not necessarily responsible for every aspect of everything I do, but I am self-reliant.
Yeah.
In self-sufficiency, I don't need Farmer Joe, Farmer Bob, or Farmer Will. I can basically do everything I need 100%. Now, I might be doing it on a small scale that only involves me. And in self-reliance, I'm doing it on a larger scale because what I grow might also support the other farmers to some extent, and there's trade and interaction going on. Not to say that these things are mutually independent. I might be able to be self-sufficient, but again, I choose to be self-reliant.
Yeah. The cons involved in self-reliance are that it is a higher level of time and energy commitment and a lot of resources. It's going to require more of you in a lot of ways. And as we were alluding to a moment ago, or as Jonathan was alluding to a moment ago, it is logistics independent. You do not have, none of us have the capacity to produce everything that we need. Mm-hmm. If we're Farmer Bob and we produce wheat, well, wheat alone would not really sustain us very well. I mean, we could get by probably. We could just eat wheat, I guess, but it wouldn't be terribly good for us. So we do need Farmer Joe to give us milk or to give us meat or other vegetables. So in that sense, we are still dependent on someone else to produce the things that either we do not have the time, energy, resources, or interest in intending to. It is still dependent on a system or community of sorts. And to the feasibility aspect is that it's kind of a medium to high feasibility. And a lot of it has to do with just how much you're willing to put into it. But it's definitely something that we could all do. I mean, we could all start, even if we're in an urban environment, we can all start backyard gardens. We can, and if you're in an apartment, you can. Jason McConnell's in an apartment, and he has a pretty decent little garden on his balcony. He's growing sweet potatoes, and he's growing tomatoes, and I think he may even be okra. And occasionally, the chickens, some of the baby chicks, live on his balcony when we're out of room in my garage. And so he's got himself kind of quite the comical little farm on his balcony. And we're still at a point of low feasibility for high impact, low probability events, meaning that, and for fans of 1 Second After will really appreciate this, which is there is a part of the book where the main character's daughter, who's diabetic, there's been a complete grid crash, and they're not able to get any more insulin for her. And he starts mentally running through like everything that is involved in getting that insulin, and which is that the plastics are made here, the insulin itself is made, here, and the glass containers that the glass bottles the insulin's in come from someplace else, and then it's all taken to one area where it's all put together, plus you have syringes and everything else. And so it's this very complicated web, and even if we are still Farmer Bob producing, we still have other dependencies because we can't do everything. And that is the issue we come into with self-reliance, is that there is a drop-off, and while you are more independent of others, you are still not completely independent of others. That leads us into self-sufficiency, and you could kind of give it the air quotes of, we could call it the lone wolf. And self-sufficiency from the standpoint, as Jonathan was talking about a little while ago, which is that it's the complete state of you need absolutely no one else for anything. And if you think about that for a minute, you really will grasp and come to appreciate why that is completely impossible. Unless you are willing to move to the woods, wear a loincloth, and live as humanity did a couple thousand years ago or longer. At that point, you could be self-sufficient. You could forage, you could hunt, you could, run around in a loincloth, which actually seems very entertaining to me. Nice and breezy in this hot weather. There might be some chafing involved, but I don't think that's a lifestyle that any of us really want to adopt, at least not for more than a weekend.
Right.
And therein lies the problem, because the theme of the entire website and the show is urban survival. So for the context of us, we've already said there are very definite limits to what we're willing to do and how far we're willing to go for survival. For us that said, okay, we're willing to stay in the city where the land available to us to actually produce meat and vegetables and everything else we need is very limited. And so we can only, for most of us, we can only kind of chip away, and we can only be a certain level of self-reliant. You know, even the amount of space I have, and with the project that Jason McConnell and I are doing with the farm, even that is very finite. And he and I very quickly using some calculations that, if I can find them again, I'll put them in the show notes, but I don't know that I can. But there are calculations for figuring out exactly how much square footage you need to produce enough meat and vegetables for a human being to sustain in a healthy way. And even with, I think we have about 2,000 square feet of space available to us, and quite a bit of vertical space available to us. And we quickly figured out that, you know, if it was just Jason and I producing food for ourselves, then we could do it. But let's face it, in most instances, we're not just producing for either ourselves or just two people. So, and at least not being able to kick it up to the point of having surplus so that we can actually store.
Well, and one of the advantages of a modern civilization is leisure time. And so the biggest downside of having to be completely self-sufficient is you go back to a time when there really is no such thing as leisure time. Mm-hmm. You're 100% focused all the time on providing for yourself. Exactly.
Every last bit of your energy, with the exception of when you take a break to maybe do some cave paintings or something in your loincloth.
No, actually, to be honest, even that came from the idea that there was a communal response.
Oh, did it? Okay. All right.
Yeah, so even then, the whole ability to go step aside and be able to do a cave painting came from the fact that human beings... So actually, I'm going to throw this in now. I could wait till later, but I'll throw it in right now. One of the reasons we've gone through this is to go back to the whole idea of, you know, harkening back to survival chi. The first thing in survival chi is community. And for those of you that remember way back, we talked about the fact that there really is no such thing as a effective lone wolf. And the reason for that is human beings by nature are communal animals. That's what we are. You know, you could argue animals, whatever you want. That's fine. We're communal beings. We live in packs or herds or communities or whatever you want, neighborhoods, whatever you want to call it. And I apologize for dogs barking in the background if you can hear that.
Is that the tactical Bacchus?
Those are tactical Boston Terriers.
Yes.
And apparently somebody knocked on the door. So they're taking them out right now. You know, I've got them prepared for the zombie apocalypse and any kind of bath salt attack.
Good.
Yes. So they're taking that person out as we speak. All, 36 pounds of their combined weight. But so back to what I was saying is, because we really... Aaron and I both have this philosophy, I believe, you know, that it's all about community. The idea of self-sufficiency can still be true, but it's a self-sufficient community. And that's why I made the differentiation. If each person is self-reliant, but part of a community, the community can become self-sufficient. And that way there can be trade and activity. And then you can actually focus on some things we do need. And I think, you know, I need them. I think, Aaron, you need them also, but that downtime. Mm-hmm. There is a need for some level of entertainment or downtime or mental rest that we all require and need. And by having that community to provide us that self-sufficiency, and I'm using self here in a very loose, broader term. Maybe it's community self-sufficiency or something like that. By having that community around that can actually get us to that level, then all of a sudden the efforts that you and Jason are doing mixed with the efforts that other people are doing can be combined. So now all of a sudden you can't just feed 2 or 3 people, you can feed 30 or 40 people. And now it's not just feeding those people, but it's providing them medical care, it's providing them fuel, whatever it might be, skills, additional skills that you don't have, or, you know, because we don't all have the time to go learn everything.
Yes, I've tried. It doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. There's just no way to do it.
There really isn't. And, you know, it's a really good thing we sent you to anthropology school, man.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think since we've used the green beans throughout, if it's still a little fuzzy, we might as well throw it in here. But with green, if we're going to continue on with the green bean, would that be an analogy or metaphor? I'm having
I
some
think that's
brain
a
farts.
metaphor.
I think it might be.
Well, Brian, I don't know.
Whatever it is.
It's too early on a Sunday morning.
Yes, we are.
Happy Father's Day, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and the soon-to-be fathers, and the one-day would-be fathers. And we were if we're a little off today, we were recording the show a little earlier, actually a lot earlier in the morning than we normally do, so that we can go tend to our fathers. But to continue on with the green bean metaphor, analogy, whatever, we would have to produce the fertilizer, and human waste in general is not a good fertilizer. So you're not a good fertilizer factory for the most part. I know there are ways to do it, but in general. So you'd have to do that. You'd have to get that manure from the livestock, which would also mean that you'd have to be tending to the livestock. And let me tell you, the more livestock you have, it becomes very time consuming. There's a lot of care, feeding, and general maintenance of animals. And then from that, you have to figure out how you're going to procure water, and that can either be rainwater collection or a well, and you have to have dug that well, and you have to tend to that well on a regular basis, or if it's a rainwater collection system or whatever system it is, you had to build it, you had to make the materials that you use to build it, and you have to then maintain that. And then from there, we also have to plant and harvest whatever these green beans. And then we have to can them. Well, guess what? You now also have to, if we're going to talk about true self-sufficiency, you also now have to make those glass jars and those metal lids, or whatever you're using for a lid. I know there's other ways of doing a lid, but you have to now make that jar and lid that you're going to use to can it.
Good thing I took up glass blowing.
Exactly. I'm telling you, man, Dale Chihuly, he's going to be set. And you have to do all of this within the home that you built by hand, with the lumber that you harvested and the trees that you processed and planed into nice straight boards, or the log cabin or whatever. So, and I mean, we could go on and on at nauseum at everything involved, but I think you get the idea, especially when we start talking about you'd have to make the jar. I mean, think about that. All the pieces, everything involved in that. You would be responsible for every last thing. And look around, no matter where you are right now, look around. If you're in your office, if you're in your car, if you're in your home, look around you. And think about all the things that are around you that human hands made. You would now have to make all of those things. Unless we go back to the loincloth, and that's the lifestyle you're willing to live. And since you're listening to an urban survival show, you're not willing to live that lifestyle. I'm not willing to live the lifestyle. I've worn a loincloth once, and really I kind of drew the line at about 2 days, and I think Jonathan was okay with it for about 60 seconds. Because, I
was only okay with you wearing the loincloth for less than 60 seconds.
Yeah, because as we found, crossing your legs, it is kind of important when you're wearing loincloth, because nobody really wants to sit there and stare at your junk while you're having a glass of vodka in the woods. And so we go back to the idea that is not a lifestyle we're willing to choose. So self-sufficiency as a complete is a myth. We can reach pretty high levels of self-reliance, but self-sufficiency as this idea of that we each as an individual are a closed loop system is completely unrealistic for anybody. Even if you are a very talented farmer that also happens to be a very good craftsman and everything else, somebody still has to make the tools you use. There is something, there are supplies and everything else that you either just don't have the time, energy, or just pure talent and skill to do. Whether that is a mental barrier of I just don't want to do it, or whether it's just a physical barrier of you just can't do it. I mean, there's plenty of things that all of us have run across in life where we're just no good at it. And we come to it at that point. But I guess that's kind of we kind of led with the cons there. The pros, of course, are that you could be a completely closed loop, perfect system. if we want to spitball this and just have some mental masturbation, there is probably a point at some point in the distant future that we could actually be self-sufficient. If we want to get geeky about it, I mean, there's going to be a point in society, if we don't blow ourselves up or whatever, or, completely come to a grinding halt because of the bath salt zombie apocalypse, then see, we've managed to actually get the zombies in each point. But but at a point where robots have become and computers have become sophisticated enough, and we can build automated systems and these amazing, wonderful new 3D printers that are now out, and that can be introduced in the system, and we really could reach a technological marvel of being each individual could be a closed loop system. But I don't see that happening soon, and it's certainly not in my lifetime.
Nah.
And I wouldn't see it in my children or my grandchildren's lifetime. But then again, that part of the conversation is purely just for fun to think about what it would actually take. How far would human society have to advance for us to actually become individually closed loop systems? And even then, I don't think we'd want to. I mean, there still is, there is almost a pleasure in commerce. There is still an interaction in that, and an opportunity to meet and interact with new people and to benefit one another in a way. So, and that we lose that in a closed loop system. And I think there's been plenty of entertainment, television programs and movies and stuff that have wrestled with the concept of humanity coming to that point. And the issue that always comes up is the idea that we end up in isolation, and it doesn't work well for human beings. And again, of course, it's all theoretical because we've never come to that point that we're aware of, but we're still there. And so the idea of self-sufficiency is a beautiful fairy tale, but it is just that. It is a fairy tale. If maybe you kind of got lost and we're wondering, what was the point of this again? The point of this again was to understand where we are each as individuals, and to ask each of you to stop and think about where you are and gain some perspective on what it means to be prepared, what it means to be self-reliant, and what it would mean to be self-sufficient. And I think that really helps also in the idea that it makes concepts more real and more concrete for us, and it allows us to move forward without misconceptions or misplaced fairy tales. And with that, we wrap up episode 72. Thank you for joining us. This has been an episode from the In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great survival stuff.